In 2 days, the English translation of Gabriel García Márquez's last novel Until August comes out. A novel that was not supposed to be published. A novel that the author in his final years, succumbing to age and dementia, wanted destroyed, criticizing its literary merit. In what they themselves call an act of betrayal, his sons decided to publish it, and as they write in the introduction, put his readers' pleasure ahead of all other considerations. They hoped that if the readers enjoy it, their father would forgive them. But let's leave talk of ethicality aside and let's talk spoiler free about the novel itself, which I was fortunate enough to read already as it came out in the Russian translation. Until August follows a middle-aged woman who travels to a small Caribbean island every August to lay flowers at her mother's grave. It's a trip fraught with difficulties, a trip where she feels starkly the contrast between her warm and cozy city life with the hot shower and general amenities, the life in the city with her husband and her daughter made more warm by the passionate nights she continues to share with her husband even after all these years. And yet she finds herself looking forward to the ritual of visiting the island, to that yearly process of laying flowers that grow only in one particular spot at her mother's grave, to the terrifying canoe ride to get to the island, to the people that recognize her, to the dingy hotel she stays in with walls so thin they're called walls in name only, walls that permit her to hear the bird song. Don't get her wrong, she's happy in her marriage. She has all that she wants, but yet these solitary visits, this time alone, this time to herself, is something she looks forward to yearly. And yet, somewhere along the way, those solitary journeys, that chance to reconnect with yourself, transforms into nights of going out and dressing up and going on the hunt for men. The first encounter leaves her guilty and ashamed, terrified to admit to her husband that she might have perhaps just destroyed their happy marriage. And yet the subsequent encounters leave her curious, thirsty, hungry for more. Suddenly she can't help but look for a second encounter in the subsequent visit, and then a third, and then a whole string of encounters. A whole string of romantic dates, this process, this journey of seduction with men of varying degrees of accomplishment, until August revolves around this yearly affair of the double life of a married, middle-aged woman, and of the passage of time as she begins to age and as her marriage begins to demonstrate its strains, brought apart not only by her illicit affairs, but by the strains of her marriage in general, the problems she has with her husband, the problems people begin to realize as they age and grow more mature. It's a novel I could best describe as cinematic because the focus is rather on the visual imagery, on the outside rather than an introspective look at Anna Magdalena Bach's mental state. It's filled with sultry descriptions of summer encounters, short, vivid bursts of physical imagery. The novel transports you to August, those warm summer months of longing, of possibility, of the last days of a sun before the start of autumn, before the start of, for students, their a new academic year, for people who work, the start of yet another long wait for the next holidays. August is a month of last chances, of second chances. August is a month of warmth, of promise, of this feeling that you could suddenly prolong your life, that you're truly living life as is, as should be. And the novel perfectly portrays this feeling with its intimate descriptions as we dive further and further into Anna's view. A view that is almost entirely physical. This is a novel composed of visuals rather than of plot, flashes of physical descriptions, entanglements of limbs, quick-fire kisses, gentle touches. It is a sensual novel, more love than exploration of a deeper pursuit of the problems of these illicit affairs, the problems of becoming so addicted to the adrenaline that comes only from the rush of a forbidden relationship. Anna is a character we know more like a romantic partner than a fleshed out woman. She's a woman we never ever fully get to understand or even have the opportunity to sit down and reflect with and talk with, and it is in this way that the novel feels incomplete, like a rough draft, like a sketch rather than a completed painting, like a model of a sculpture, like its mold than the finished marble product that you might see in a museum. We do, however, have some subtle clues from this short work of Marquez's literary genius, something he likely would have taken further if he had the chance. The clues come, amongst other things, for example, from the novels that Anna reads. She's a voracious reader. She reads constantly, and it is in this that we feel our first inkling of kinship towards her, when it's a strange feeling to have towards a woman we don't really know other than from her passionate carnal pleasure side of things. It's a strange feeling for a woman who knows fully that what she's doing is wrong and that she's having this string of affairs in a life that was perfectly happy with her husband. And yet, all moral considerations tell us to think otherwise, that we shouldn't have some sense of empathy and even some sense of sympathy towards this woman. And yet we really do feel for her. Not just as readers who see ourselves in the novels that she likes and the novels that she takes with her, from Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was a whole series on this channel, to Camus, the Stranger, that was also a video on this channel, to Hemingway. There's much understanding that can be reached between two readers. And even if they're very different people, and this is very much felt for readers who have read the novels that she reads, it almost feels like an instant connection between us and Anna. Well, what can I say? Marquez knows his audience. And also, of course, these novels are not just there to make us feel like, oh, we have the same taste. No, these novels are there to mirror her state. But rather than completely mirror her, these are infinite small promises of what could have been if Marquez actually had the chance to complete this novel and to do with it as he sees fit. In short, we see ourselves in Anna a little. Not just because she reads, and definitely not because we're middle-aged women with a string of affairs, but we see ourselves in the feelings that she has. They're very much universal. We see ourselves and we feel for her because we understand that feeling of being cooped up. That feeling of claustrophobia is a feeling I guarantee everyone has experienced at least once, when everything is perfect and good and happy and you're living the dream life, but yet you have this sense of restlessness. I wouldn't call it greed, I wouldn't call it longing for something more. It's just a sense that you're not really where you're supposed to be, or that this doesn't feel real, or that this doesn't feel like you, or that this doesn't feel authentic. It's a never-ending sense of urgency. It's that feeling of not doing enough, of wasting time, of living life not being aware where society's desires start and your desires start and where they all end. This will be a book that's familiar to all those who have experienced the sudden crisis, a revelation, what we see as a happy revelation if we're in the mood, or as a fleeting thought if we're not in the mood. This is that midlife crisis we joke about when people quit their 9-to-5 jobs and go out chasing dreams, or when teenagers and young people think they should be drinking and partying and not knowing if that's what they want or if that's what they think they should want. But then again, who knows what true living is if for all of these different groups of people, true living is always different, always depending on age, always depending on context, always depending on mental state. For some, it could be buying that flashy red Ferrari, or a new home, or getting a new job. Or for some, like Anna Magdalena Bach, it could be going to a Caribbean island in search of affairs. It's not something we can obviously condone. It doesn't excuse her actions, but that feeling of desperation, that feeling of restlessness is familiar. And it's this that makes us continue reading what is a very racy, gets you flush under the collar sort of novel, all until the end. That and its literary merit, of course. This is a feeling that emerges very much from the passage of time, when we are reminded once again to seize the day, or another memento mori. And this is masterfully reflected in the passage of time on the island. She begins by taking a canoe, but then slowly it's not a canoe, it's a dingy little boat with a motor. And then suddenly it's a proper boat. And then suddenly it's a whole ferry. She begins by staying in what's literally like a piece of cloth strung between two trees, in a hammock, sleeping under the open sky, then in a hut, then in a hotel, and then suddenly she's spoiled for choice with hotels popping up all over the place. And then suddenly we go from rickety little cafes to proper diners to proper restaurants to parties as the island transforms from a place where only a few come, where Anna knows everyone, to an island populated by tourists. It's very much a novel that reflects the dawn of a new age and the passage of time, and it's in the subtle moments that we feel this, and when it all comes together for us, so too does it for Anna, and she slowly realizes that the novelty of the affairs is wearing off. She's no longer so interested, she's no longer so passionate about these random men. With each one, it in fact gets worse. The island is transformed from the sensual garden of earthly delights with less of the weird boss stuff and more of the carnal pleasures, and it's suddenly transformed into just another version of the city, just a holiday destination rather than this romantic hideaway where she gets to experience being what she thinks is free, what she thinks is true living, the same true living that we all aspire for in our moments of reflection and philosophizing. She sees the flaws in her action and it wears on her. It wears on the novel, it erodes the picture perfect stereotypes away, and I won't go into detail for fear of spoilers, but the passage of time is one of the novel's greatest literary strengths, and I'm sure that if Marquez could actually finish it, this would be amongst one of the main finer points of the novel. Even with its incompletion, the ending is incredibly apt. It draws the novel into this sudden, neat, perfect close, into this circular loop back that makes us realize just how much Anna has matured, just how much time has passed, and just how much we, as the reader, have matured, and suddenly we see the novel for what it really is. It isn't just a summer beach read, but it's a novel with its merit. It's a work deserving of Marquez, and we can finally truly appreciate the symbols that we have seen in previous chapters. The symbols are a whole other conversation. Think Chekhov's principle of leave no gun unfired. Marquez provides us with a whole string of powerful little recurrent themes that pop up all over the story. Whether it's the mentions of the novel that Anna reads or the $20 bill that haunts her. This is not a major spoiler, it's in the first half of the novel, but after one of her affairs, the man leaves Anna a $20 note. A $20 note that really haunts her, that pops up again and again, and it's a masterful use of foreshadowing. It shows evidence of good planning on Marquez's part from the onset to the very final, powerful close. It's a shadow of a masterpiece. It leaves us longing, and frankly, it's a bit depressing because it leaves us despondent that the novel was never properly fully completed. Because unfortunately, it does have those elements of incompletion. It does feel as more of a concept of something that could have been great rather than something that is entirely great. But the writing and the structure in general, this outline of what we have, is so captivating that I personally am content enough to largely ignore this. The pathetic fallacy that comes up when Anna has her passionate nights, the way that the weather reflects her emotions, the way that the sea and the blue lagoon moves. In general, the novel is filled with the most wonderful lyrical descriptions. This is undeniably a work by Marquez, even if it is seemingly diluted with the occasional banalities. Banalities we can assume he would have removed, or maybe he wrote down and then scorned later on, which is why he was so hesitant to publish it. In fact, this is a novel that personally motivated me to read more of his works, because in fact I have a confession to make. When I read 100 Years of Solitude in English, I was not a fan. What really helped me was a friend who speaks Russian, English, and Spanish who told me that the Russian translation is far closer to the Spanish original, and after reading this book, I had a finer appreciation for Marquez's craft because I could see that what I liked in 100 Years of Solitude would be taken one step further with a translation that really hit home. But maybe I'm being critical. Maybe I should give it another chance. But anyway, the richness of the language, it captivates and it enthralls. And I would hope that it does, regardless of the translation, with until August, because I feel like from the excerpts that I have read of reviews published online of this book in English, the translation does seem to be quite close with what was there in Russian. So I can only hope that the novel has its merits in any language. It is always hard to draw the line between not liking something or not liking the writing when a novel is translated, and hence to recommend something if you're not entirely sure of what that book sounds like to a speaker from a different language, from a different country, from a different culture. But regardless of who the flaws in the writing can be attributed to, whether to the author or to the translator, they serve as a very poignant and as a very important reminder that this novel was incomplete. It is definitely not as complete as publicists would have us believe when they call it the lost novel rather than the last novel. The novel that they portray as, oh, he was almost done with, but then we just forgot about it. No, I think that it is very much a novel that was potentially a pre-final draft, but a draft that would have nevertheless undergone many changes had Marquez actually had the chance to finish it. And I'm sure that anyone who's familiar with Marquez's work can see it, because it is desperately in need of what would feel like some completions. There were some ideas and some notions that felt like he was going to take them further, but then he never did. Which brings me to the small discussion of the publication of this book, which I could not help but talk about. Marquez is not the first writer to ask for his work to be destroyed. Look at Kafka's work. Look at Gogol trying to burn his work. Look at the Diary of Anne Frank even. It is always a balance between respecting the author's wishes to not publish and the merits of publishing a truly great literary work that you know readers across time and culture will love. In this desire, maybe I'm simply not cynical enough to criticize the sons who wish to publish it and who said that they just hope that maybe the readers will like it and maybe their father would forgive them. Besides, it does help that Marquez was more vocal about this novel, more vocal about the fact that he was working on it, more vocal about the novel in general. He sent versions of it to his editor, which is how they managed to compile it. He had typewritten notes, he had handwritten notes, and frankly, he didn't destroy it like he destroyed a lot of his other manuscripts. So when he said later on in this final stages of dementia that he hated the novel and that he wanted it to be destroyed, it's hard to know exactly how much he accurately remembered from what the novel actually is. This makes it a little different from Anne Frank's situation, for example, because when he did view it with a clear mind, he was going to go ahead with it, but then he suddenly saw its flaws. So how much of it was a change of mind and how much of it was dementia? But then of course it sets a dangerous precedent of completely disregarding authors' opinions and claiming that it's just their dementia. And frankly, it's a moral conundrum that Marquez didn't want to tarnish his reputation with something the readers would perhaps perceive as not great or not worthy of his legacy, and then for his sons to decide for him that it is worthy of his legacy is a whole other ethical debate. And the way that publishing markets this as a lost novel rather than a last novel makes it difficult to know just how much he would appreciate his work that he felt was incomplete being presented as a complete work to be judged as a complete work. But then again, who are we to judge what Marquez would think? Especially coming from us who don't know this man, which is, I think, important to acknowledge, that we feel like we know him, that we feel like we know his desires, but we don't. Perhaps the closest people to actually know his desires would be his sons, who frankly thought that, all things considered, he would likely have wanted it published. Maybe I'm just not cynical enough in thinking that they want the money, but they're his sons, and I don't know, it doesn't feel like something that you would do if you weren't confident that he, at least at some point in his life, wanted to publish it. And I think the way forward, well, for me at least, is to judge this work based on the foundation and based on the premise that the work that you have in front of you is a draft A work that I frankly liked tremendously, even with its flaws. Flaws I assume would have been corrected, or maybe they wouldn't. It's very individual to judge, because it takes so much effort to decide how much of it would have been corrected, and frankly, viewing this as incomplete is for me the best way. To view this as a novel that you are judging right now, but keeping in mind that it could have been better. It's a highly individual judgment, but a judgment that I would nevertheless recommend every individual make by reading until August. Thank you.